What is up, everybody? It's Dr. Vibe here, host and producer of the award-winning Dr. Vibe show. As I always like to say, you're blessed, highly favored, a magnet for miracles, and a solution for someone's problem. I'm the host of Epic Conversations, and this is the place for Epic Conversations. And do note, I was a 2018 Innovation Award winner, handed out by the Canadian Ethnic Media Association. So we're at the right place in the right time. And you know, I always get excited. I'm excited most of the time new friends come on the platform. And we have a new friend on the platform tonight. So let me give you some background about this outstanding and finely dressed young gentleman. Dr. Lamont Ali Francies was born and raised in San Francisco. He is a senior minister of the Delta Bay Church of Christ in Antioch, California. And I know someone else from Antioch, so I better shout him out right now. Dr. Lawrence A. Rashid, who's a regular friend and a sharer on the Do You Know What Time It Is, the live audio roundtable I have with Black male thought leaders on Sunday evenings at 9 p.m. Eastern time. He's a regular contributor. So he is a major reason why we have this new friend tonight. So let me get back to him. He's an adjunct professor of sociology at Brandman University. He also works as an administrator of African American student achievement at Mount Diablo Unified School District for the Mount Diablo Unified School District. He also does equity work district-wide and is sought-after speaker conducting workshops for numerous educational institutions. He has been invited to conferences dealing with African American. He has also authored several articles that deal with Black faith tradition and the critique of multiculturalism. He is also the president of the Mount Diablo Black Educators Association, remains an unapologetic advocate for Black students and families. Let me just say that again, an unapologetic advocate for Black students and families. He holds a Master of Arts in both Sociology and Counseling. He also holds a pupil personnel credential in counseling and a doctorate degree from the University of San Francisco in International and Multicultural Education. He currently lives in the Bay Area with his wife, Tiffany, and their 5 children. So as you know, this man is not lazy. Let's just put it out there. He's not lazy. He's positive, productive, big time. So we'd like to welcome Dr. Francis to the Dr. Vibe show for the first time and hopefully not the last time.
How you doing, Dr. Vibe? Peace and love, my brother. Peace and love.
All right. And like I said, you're blessed, highly favored, a magnet for miracles, and a solution for someone's problem. I just want to say that the subject that Dr. Francis is going to be chatting about tonight is Black male teachers in K-12 schools. And it's very interesting that I did a little research. And here's something interesting. African Americans consist of about 12 to 12.5% of the American population.
Yes, sir.
But African American males are only 2% of the teachers in the public school K-12 system in America. Sir. Interesting. So what we're going to do is we're going to get to that. But after reading that wonderful bio, we need to find out, like we do most of the time when we have new friends on, a little bit about your background. So what was life growing up in the Bay Area?
Life was, it's great. I'm a child of the 80s and the 90s. I loved growing up in San Francisco before it was gentrified. I'm a product of the Bayview Hunters Point community. I love my close-knit community. We were a tight community with a lot of family bonds. In our community, I saw people overcome struggles. We were not the richest family. I was raised right there on by Kisco Road, right by the Kisco Road projects, right there in Bayview, Hunters Point. But I remember having a fun childhood. Did not know what was really going on until I was older. But I enjoyed growing up in the Bay Area. Love the weather up here. And I was a product of a single parent home. I have one brother who's 14 months older. And we did a lot. We ran the streets. We did some things that we are not proud of. I just thank God that they did not have cell phone cameras in the 80s and 90s, or I may not be where I am today. So I thank God for that, right?
Okay. All right.
But we did.
There you
But
go.
you know what? God is good.
What was life growing up in a single parent home back in the 80s and 90s for
Well,
you?
my dad was alive at the time. He's recently deceased, and he lived his life. I hold no animosity against him, but it was tough because without a father in the home, you lacked confidence to do certain things. At times, I felt like I didn't have a covering. I did not have that male figure. And what a male figure and a father is called to do is call out to his child who the child is and who the child will become, and give the child a sense of belonging and identity. And I did not have that for a long time growing up. And so I felt that I did not have that covering. So I had a mom who had to play both mother and father, and she worked. She was a college graduate of San Jose State, so she had her bachelor's degree. So she was an educated woman, but she struggled financially, and she did her best raising us. But it was tough growing up without a father. But because so many of my peers in that community didn't have a father, I didn't think it was strange not to have one. So a lot of times the first male father figure that I saw was on the Cosby Show. I didn't know what fathers look like.
Wow, my goodness. Then what what outstanding qualities did your mother have back then?
Yes, yes, she
And
is.
is she still alive today, by the way? Okay, so what legacy have you carried from her
Well, the
presence in your
legacy, the
life?
greatest thing that my mother gave to me and my brother was faith. Okay. Uh, she would always say, Mom is not the richest person, but she is a righteous person. So I can say this: growing up in the Hunters Point projects, I grew up in a home where I never heard my mother curse. My mother never drank, and she never had men running in and out of the house. And so we lived in a almost a bubble outside of the community around us. And my mother was very strict on the rules, and she believed in Black excellence. And she used to always tell us, poor does not equate to ghetto. Just because we're poor doesn't mean we have to be ghetto, because ghetto is a state of mind. And so I thank God for my mom, but the greatest thing she gave me was her faith. We were not always able to afford the latest shoes. We used to go to a place called Copeland's, and Copeland's you would have two for 30, two for 40, two for 50, and we would go and get discount shoes. And I didn't always have the best clothes, but she gave me something way more important. She gave me her faith, and it was a hand-me-down faith, and it was that faith that sustained me as I grew older and helped me become the man God called me to be.
Now
Yes,
you
she did.
said she went to college. Where where did she get the influence? And you said you didn't have a, where did she get the money and the influence and the time
Well, my
to go to
grandparents are from
college?
Beaumont, Texas. Her parents are from Beaumont, Texas. And all of them came out, and they came out to California in the 1950s. Um, and most of them were not college graduates. I don't think any of them were college graduates, but they all had a certain work ethic, and they were all homeowners. And my grandfather was a business owner in the Fillmore district. And he had my mother and my aunts and uncles. And my mother was, I believe, the only one out of six kids to go to college and to graduate with her bachelor's degree. And so my grandfather was a very hardworking man. He believed in the power of education and what it could do. And so I think that's where my mother got it from. My grandfather, he was just a very, very amazing man, and did income tax for the community and really helped a lot of Blacks in his time.
Wonderful. That is great. So you said you had a
Yes, I did.
challenging childhood at times. When did it start to turn?
Um, I would say my childhood got challenging. It became challenging upon going to school. So you have to understand, the Bayview Hunters Point community was a very tight community, predominantly African American community at the time. And so that was my world. My world was Black. And I remember going to elementary school. I was bused to a school called Glen Park, which was across town. And that was the first real interaction that I had with someone that did not look like me. Students from different racial backgrounds, white students, Latino students, and then also white teachers and white administrators. And for the first time, I had to learn how to what they call code switch. I had to learn dual identities and how to behave one way on the block and how to behave another way in the classroom. And so I can remember vividly in the fourth grade being singled out along with other African American young men for behaviors that were thrust upon us by the teacher at the time. And we suffer from a lot of racial microaggressions. We didn't understand it until we were older, but a lot of times we were singled out because of I believe our race and our background and our social economic status, which was totally different from the teacher that was in the classroom. And so things began to get tough. And at that time, I was searching for an identity. When I got to middle school was tough because I was exposed to a lot more than my mother told me about. My mother really wanted us to live a pretty sheltered life, but we had to enroll in the School of Hard Knocks because my father was not in the home. Our male role models were pimps and players and hustlers, drug dealers. We learned a lot from them in the streets. And so we were baptized into the game. And I had to learn how to navigate that world, at the same time, use the gems that my mother gave me to excel in the educational environment.
Okay. So obviously your mother set
She
the
did.
foundation for education. How was your journey through education? Because I do compliment you. You've got a lot of great educational background. Was it something that basically you knew you were going to get into before you got into intense education, or was it something that mother or the environment?
Well, I can say this. My brother, he's older than me, and he struggled a lot more in school. I was when I was in the third grade, I was slated as in the GATE program, which is gifted and talented education. But I can remember by the fourth grade, they wanted to, the teachers had a meeting and they wanted to put me on some kind of medication because they said I was too hyper. And I can remember my mom advocating vividly. And she says, there is no way that I'm going to give my son any kind of medication or put him in any special classes. Okay. And she says, so my mom's solution to that whole problem was the belt. Now that was back in the 80s, but that worked. And I was cured. I was fine. But she, she would advocate for me. And because I knew she had a bachelor's degree, I knew I had to get at least that. I had to get a bachelor's degree. But throughout middle and high school, I never had a teacher that looked like me. I didn't have any Black male teachers in the classroom who looked like me. The closest I had was in middle school. There was a Black vice principal during that time, and he did not play. And he spoke to me in a way that I understood. I heard my uncles, I heard my community, I heard my ministers, I heard the men in my community every time he spoke. And when he spoke to my mother, he spoke to her like a relative, like he was an uncle. And so I allowed him to discipline me. And I knew when he said something, he meant business, because he received permission from my mother to discipline me And because of that connection that he made with the home, it enabled him to go ahead and discipline me in a way that was conducive for my educational success.
You've done a number of different programs in the area of education. You have a counseling and doctorate degree from the University of San Francisco. It just seemed that once you finished a program, you seemed to want to get into another program. There was always another challenge for you. Am I correct?
Yes, sir. Yes, sir. Just tell you about my education. So, I after I leave high school, my freshman year, I didn't have a 2.0. I wasn't even eligible to play my freshman year of basketball, and so I knew that was not me. But the transition into high school was tough for me, and so I got my act together, got my grades together, and I can remember vividly going to high school and doing my own research. And this is before we had the internet, trying to make sure that I was CSU or UC eligible and ready to go to college, because I wanted to go to college. I knew that. And so I can remember vividly in high school being in college prep classrooms that did not have a lot of my peers. And so I had to learn to code switch. I had to learn how to get along with people from different backgrounds, because most of the Blacks were in the remedial classrooms. And by the time I was a senior, I got into several schools, and one of them was Pepperdine University. So you can imagine a young boy growing up in Hunters Point, and then all of a sudden he has to take what he learned there, and he finds himself in the 90s at Pepperdine University. And then in the year I got into Pepperdine University, the Black population was below 2%. And it was a culture shock for me. Because it was not just a white audience, but it was an elite white audience, and it was a very prestigious school. And I did not feel like I belonged. I felt like a token. I didn't know how I got in. I got into the school, and I didn't know what to do. I can remember vividly calling home saying, I don't really want to be here. There was no BET. There was no forms of cultural community for me. And I felt like I was losing my racial identity attending that school. And I remember going into my freshman year English class. And as I went into that class, there was my first black teacher in Pepperdine, of all places. He was a young black professor. Young black professor.
Yeah, exactly.
No kidding. He was a young black professor in his 30s at the time. And I, believe it or not, I came into the classroom. I was dressed like I was still, in the streets, and talking the street lingo and sagging my pants. And I can remember after the class, he pulled me to the side and said, "Why are you doing this?" I said, "Doing what?" He says, this act, this. He said, "Brother, I was in this class and you mentioned something about Beowulf and you explained it." He said, "Most of the people in here, even the white students, don't know about this stuff." He says, "You are intelligent and I have high expectations of you. So next time you come to my class, this is how you ought to dress. This is how I want you to behave on this campus." Okay. And he formed a relationship. And I was mesmerized by this young black teacher. This young black teacher, this professor, in that class, I earned my first A. And it was there that I realized that I belong. I belong. And I always would tell him to this day, "You gave me my first A." He says, no, you earned that. I don't give grades. You earned that A. And it was from him I realized I belong. So here's a black man who was not only a professor, but he was a preacher. So he's a pastor, he's a minister in a church. And here's a guy who didn't cuss, didn't drink, and didn't cheat on his wife. And I said, I want to be just like that. And it was because of him I got into ministry, because he allowed me my first time to preach in a pulpit. And I said, okay, I think I'm going to do this the rest of my life. And so from his example and from his presence, it totally changed my life. So I follow his steps. I talk to him once a week, even to this day. And he is my father in the gospel. I love him. We're colleagues, but I still call him, by his proper title, even to this day, because of the respect that I have for this man. But it was that first Black teacher, and that's what got me into education, because of the difference that he made in my life.
You've covered a lot, because I was going to ask you as a conversation piece, do you still keep in touch with this gentleman today? You answered that. And I was going to ask, what got you into education? So before we get into the main part of our conversation then tonight, what would have happened to you if you didn't meet that teacher?
I don't know where I would be. I might have dropped out of the school. I don't know. I don't, only the Lord knows, but I can tell you right now, I was struggling until I met him. And after when I was able to graduate from Pepperdine in 4 years, didn't know what I wanted to do. And I ended up going to graduate school in Bakersfield, of all places. And that's why I received my master's in sociology. And it was there I met another minister, and I was going to his church. And he was a sixth grade teacher, and he taught me a lot. And that's how I got into substitute teaching, because I was looking for a job. So it was either substitute teaching or Walmart. And so I chose substitute teaching. And same thing, came in, had the kids calling me by my first name, dressing in jeans and tennis shoes. And he pulled me to the side and says, we don't do that. He says, when you come, you're a young Black man. When you come on this campus, you dress appropriately. You dress like a professional. You speak a certain way in a certain tone. And so he taught me about professionalism. And so to this day, any of the students that I've come in contact in my 17 years of education, they probably have never seen me without a suit and tie. And that's the professionalism that I've learned from him. And he was a community activist, and he would put me in his car after school, and we would drive around the community in the projects, and we would go to people's door, and we would knock on the door. And I said, what are you doing? He would knock on the doors of his students that were not showing up. Okay. And this was not something he was paid to do. It was after hours. He would knock on the door and say, I haven't seen you in school. What's the problem? What can I do for you? And so to this day, this is what I do. So when they're not answering the phone, I have no problem going to anybody's house, knocking on the door, and really making a personal connection with that student. So I learned a lot from those educators.
Excellent. Nice stuff. Just a few things I want to update. I want to shout out some people on the Get Vocal platform. We have Lokesh, Mr. Wonderful, and Luke. And listening via audio on the Mixler platform, we have someone you may know. Dr. Rashid is listening, and he says, hello. So he is listening live. Absolutely. So if you're on the Get Vocal platform, you can make comments or come in visually during the conversation via webcam. Also have some people on YouTube as also. And if you're on YouTube watching this conversation, you're more than happy. Make comments, ask questions. That's fantastic. Now, education, you wanted to talk, let me get it. So you wanted to talk about the Black male teacher in K-12 schools in America. And I've wanted to have this conversation for a long period of time. Actually, before we came on live tonight, I was with a research group here in Toronto, and I told them about this conversation. I said, this is going to be fascinating. Where do you want to start this conversation?
Let me, I want to start by giving some statistics and then a historical context, and then we will talk about Black male teachers and the shortage of Black male teachers. Okay, so we know about 82% of America's school teachers are white. Okay, 13% of those teachers are white men, and which leaves 77% of all America's school teachers are white females. And Black students represent about 16% of the America's public schools, and Black teachers represent about 7% of America's public schools. Okay, so there are huge disparities, and among that 7%, just I believe, depending on the report you look at, about 2%, 1.92% are Black men. Now, we know in education, Black men, and I'm not going to go over all the statistics, but Black men lead in all of the negative categories. Okay, we are 3 times as likely to get suspended than our white counterparts. We're talking about black boys in schools, and even Black girls are 6 times as likely to get suspended than their white female counterparts. Okay, Black students are twice as likely to be identified for emotional disturbance, and 3 to 4 times as likely to be identified for special education. So with that, we see the educational system. People say it is broken. I disagree. Education, the system of education is not broken. The system of education is doing exactly what it was designed to do, and that is replicate the same social inequalities that you see on the outside. So the chief purpose of schools, and I can be in a room full of administrators, and I'll ask, what is the purpose of schools? And they will say, to enlighten the minds of children and to enhance their career options and all that stuff that we would put on our websites. But that's not reality. The chief purpose of schools is socialization and sorting, right? Putting people on certain tracks, okay? And so we've been talking about the achievement gap in schools since Brown v. Board, okay? And for whatever reason, educators can't seem to close the achievement gaps, and our kids are constantly failing. And so what we have to look at is why. A lot of times we have not looked at the why. And we looked at disparities between our students. But I'm glad that this show is focusing on disparity in hiring practices. Okay, so if Black boys are being discriminated against and they're finishing at the bottom in our public schools, how do you think they see Black men? Okay, how are Black men faring in public schools? Okay, and so I'm glad we're talking about this subject. In a lot of in many colleges around the country, okay, HBCUs, a lot of them, they have a lot of recruiting initiatives for Black men, because studies say that when a student has a teacher that looks like them, particularly Black students, when they have teachers that look like them, they tend to do better, okay? And if we already know Black boys are suffering worse than any other ethnic category in public schools, okay, then why aren't we trying to hire more Black men? Educational Secretary Duncan, okay, went to Morehouse College a few years back to recruit more Black men in the field of education, and he called it calling Black men to the blackboard. And he focused a lot on recruiting more Black men to the field of education. But where I believe he left short is this: recruitment is one thing, retention is another. We have to create a pipeline for young boys to get into the school. We found, and research says this, that Black teachers are leaving the profession faster than any other ethnic group. Okay, so it's go ahead.
So let me just interrupt that. Why do you feel that
well,
fact is so?
A number of factors, and that I believe that Black men are leaving the field of education. Okay, according to Dr. Cantor's theory on proportional representation, she gives 3 reasons why you have this social phenomena that happens in public schools. One is performance pressure. In other words, when Black teachers get into the profession, okay, they have this huge, immense pressure to save all Black boys. right? Like the job of educating Black boys only belonged to Black men, okay? As if we have the institutional power to change the system. We don't have that power. And so a lot of Black men crumble under the intense pressure to go ahead and be the savior of all Black students, okay? Number two is boundary heightening. And that happens when differences between the token and the dominant group are exaggerated. And so what would happen is the Black educators that are on campus will have boundaries and heightened boundaries between them and the white dominant group, which would cause them to, in a lot of cases, exaggerate their racial differences, and would allow them to, for example, in a campus that has predominantly has Black teachers, white teachers and a few Black teachers, it'll lead them to isolate themselves a lot of times and kind of exaggerate their racial differences to maintain a sense of cultural solidarity with other Black teachers or to maintain their cultural identity. Also, number three, role encapsulation, which means that Black male teachers are usually assigned the role of a disciplinarian, and they're usually trapped in that role. I likened it to Black teachers, Black quarterbacks, right? Black quarterbacks are known for doing, one thing. They said they're good athletes and they're known for being runners, but they're not considered smart enough to dissect the defense and to stay in the pocket, right? But they're always considered good athletes and good runners. And it's the same with Black male educators. We're considered great disciplinarians, but not respected as instructional leaders, someone that can look at good pedagogy and heighten that. Also, I believe one of the reasons why Black males are leaving is they a lot of times have to deal with the wrong perception of them, right? We are viewed as incompetent for the subject that we're teaching. And a lot of times when Black men are hired, we feel, what others feel, and maybe white teachers may feel that we're the token hire, right? Or we are the affirmative action case. And we're not really competent in that field, and that we should fit a certain stereotype. Another reason why Black male teachers leave is alienation. I can tell you this, that I, is the president of our Black Teachers Association for our district. There are a number of Black educators who eat in their rooms, right? And that's not including or excluding Black men. They eat in their rooms because they do not fit into the dominant group, and they're not able to get past a lot of the social barriers, right? Black male educators understand this, that a lot of times we are not hired based on our ability to educate, but we are hired based on our ability to assimilate into the dominant culture. For example, in the hiring practice, right? Those that are usually making the hiring decisions don't look like us, okay? And so there's a lot of racial tension maybe that happens in an interview, right? So you walk into a room and you look across the table and you look at a bunch of educators who were not socialized like you, who may not problem solve like you, and who may not understand you. And it can cause what the sociologists call a lot of racial anxiety, right? Which leads to a lot of people shutting down or whatever. But you walk into an interview process and you know that you are educated, you know that you know your stuff, but a lot of times they may not hire you because they will say you're not a team player or you won't fit into what we're trying to do. Now, the Black men, studies say, that are more likely to be hired as the only Black or the only Negro, as they would call it, are those Black men that are more likely to assimilate. okay, into the dominant culture, okay? And so they're more likely to hire the Huxtable rather than the guy from the hood. So based on your ability to be a team player and you not demonstrating any alpha male attributes, you're more likely to be a hire because you're more likely to go along to get along, and you then become the black face of the white agenda. Okay, so you almost have to be an educational albino, if that makes sense, that you don't have color, that you're there to be black as they allow you to be. Okay, and so and that's difficult for a lot of black male educators. You know, I can tell you from my experience, I was a school counselor. And as a school counselor, I can remember going in for an interview several years ago, and going into the interview and thinking to myself, knowing that there were, I believe at the time, there were 10 people that interviewed. They had 4 positions open, and I was the only male that interviewed, and I was the only African American. And so I'm trying to get hired in a district that is about 22 to 25% African American, thinking I have a great shot at getting this job. And I can remember them calling me back the next day saying we chose to go in a different direction. And I was kind of disheartened by that. Long story short, I ended up getting the district later on that year. And I remember going to the people that are on the hiring committee, and I said, how come, because they told me, you're doing a fantastic job. How come I didn't get the job? You guys, I thought I was a shoo-in. And they told me, they said, when we thought of the typical counselor, you didn't fit that, because we were looking at an academic counselor, and you look more like a social emotional counselor. And so, well, yeah, they said you
like
fit
one?
well, they said that you, in your interview, your interview came across more with dealing with the social emotional aspect and not the academic aspect. And I reminded him that in our counseling master's program, that the social emotional was an aspect of the entire counseling program. Okay, so social emotional was an integral component, but they were looking at more of the traditional counselor. And the traditional counselor was a white female that basically did your scheduling, right? When we are looking at the district, they needed more social emotional intervention as well as the academic intervention. So we were looking at all of these things, but what they were looking at is getting the typical counselor, and I did not fit the bill. So at that time, I said, wow, I feel like maybe a female firefighter and how they would feel. And even when I got into the field, it was tough because in the counseling groups,
right,
there was not a lot of people that looked like me. Okay. And if I was not dedicated to the kids and really trying to change the life of the kids, I would have left that district within a year and went and found another job. And so I'm echoing the sentiment of a lot of black male educators because it's difficult for us to get in the profession. Look at matter of fact, the yes,
doctor. I'm just going to interrupt you for a quick second because we have
I see her.
a guest who's come in. Hello, Crystal. How are you?
Hello.
Hey, Crystal. How you doing?
Fine. How you doing?
Outstanding. Thanks for stopping by. Please join the conversation. What would you like to share?
Oh, I'm just listening.
Good to see you, Crystal.
I've never done this. Good to see you, Dr. Francies. I'm sorry. I'm Crystal White. I don't know if you know who I am. I'm on the Antioch Unified School Board.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. I've known Dr. Francis for
Yes.
a while, about 3.5 years. I mean, I joined the Black Educators Association before I ran. So I'm hearing what Dr. Francis is conveying, and it's just mind-boggling. It's the truth. It's totally the truth. I worked at Job Corps. I was recently laid off, demoted 2 times, and for no reason. It's just hidden racism, entrenched, all that. And I'm just not having the best of luck. If you keep your mouth shut, you keep your job.
That's it.
Wow. So, Crystal, you being a Black woman and having that challenge, how much more difficult is it for a Black male?
It's way more challenging. And in regards to what he stated, I think, again, I try to keep my tone, keep composure, demeanor, but no, we're the angry Black woman. We're the angry Black male. I haven't met that many male. I meant to share with you. I don't know if Dr. Francis, but we don't have. I think we have. We do have a new principal, African American principal at Dozer Libby, from Fiji originally, and he was the vice principal at Pittsburgh Unified. But again, I think that's the token principal, African American male principal.
That's right. So.
Wow.
Go ahead.
Wow.
Dr.
Francis. No, well,
so it's good to see Crystal Sawyer White, and she serves on the school board in Antioch Unified School District, and she understands that we've been battling this for years, and trying to advocate for our students. And anytime we advocate for Black students, we are deemed racist, not being team players, and equity says that we have the responsibility to do so, right? When you talk about Black male educators, right, the national average says this: $39,000 first year teacher, right? So you're talking about 5 to 6 years of school, and to start off making $39,000, right? Which is tough for a lot of Black men who, remember, must be the provider and the protector of their home, right? Especially after 6 years of school. And then in California, I believe the average first year pay for a teacher is about $46,000, which sounds like a lot of money nationwide, but living in California, that's not a lot of money. It's not. It is not a lot of money, right? So I believe that deters a lot of Black men from getting into education and getting into fields that pay more. Also, I believe that education in a lot of ways have been feminized. That there are perceptions of educators as being, the field of education being feminine, or being seen as only jobs that women would take, right? And so, you don't see a lot of Black men rushing to become teachers. What do our young brothers in the schools, when we deal with them in the schools, what do they want to become? And as administrator, I have several programs that do interventions for Black boys. And most of them want to be one or two things: athletes and entertainers. Why? That's where they see themselves on TV, as athletes and entertainers, right? And not too many people want to get in the field of education. And one young brother came up to me and he says, "Why would I want to get into education when we see how they treat you guys?" Right?
Really?
When we see what you guys go through.
Wow.
Why would we ever want to go to 6 years of college to put up with that? Right? And so there's studies that show this. Not only that, Black educators are more likely to be passed up for promotion. Okay. We are more likely to have our master's degree than our white teaching counterparts, right? I have more degrees than a thermometer, right? I have 2 masters, 2 credentials, and a doctorate degree, right? And at times it's tough finding employment. Crystal Sawyer White is the most educated on her school board, okay? But a lot of times she is the victim of racial stereotypes. Even though she is the most educated, on paper, she's the most educated out of all of the board members. Now, because we are more likely to get passed up for promotion, what that means is we have to tend to work longer to accumulate the same kind of wealth or the income, okay? And then when we get into the field of education, it is tough because Black males tend to, because we're seen as disciplinarians, usually have to are called to teach at the lowest performing schools, right? In which we don't have institutional power to change. So we feel like pawns. What we do is we educate our kids for these tests. A lot of these tests are culturally biased. Our kids don't do well on the tests. Then the state comes down, punishes our kids. So we end up despising the very tests we give our kids. Then the kids see the results of the test and begin to believe that they are the results of these standardized tests that are meant to go ahead and make our boys feel bad. So we end up having to awaken their social and racial consciousness to fight against the very institution that has given us our paychecks, right? So a lot of Black men end up leaving the profession. They leave the profession because of these interactions that they're having on campus. And then because we are always dealing with the discipline, we don't get the same level of professional development that our white counterparts get in this field. We don't get the same, so we don't get a chance to build capacity in the area of improving test scores and pedagogy in the classroom. We're dealing with discipline for the most part. And so that leads to high stress levels, high burnout levels. And that takes a toll on us. That means we have more health problems, right? And so because we become, a lot of times in these classrooms, we become their fathers. If we know that, 2/3 of Black homes are headed by women, a lot of times the first positive male figure that they see is in the classroom as an educator. So I have a lot of students that will come up, and I met them second, third time, and they know I care, and they start calling me their uncle, right? In other words, they say, you act like a member of my family, right? Go ahead. You're going to say something, Dr. Vibe?
Dr. Vibe, I'm going to interrupt because there's two things. First of all, I want Crystal.
Go ahead.
It looks like Crystal has some things she wants to share, and plus there are 3 questions that Dr. Rashid has. But I always, in tradition of the Dr. Vibe show, it's always ladies first.
Okay. Well,
so Crystal,
first of all, I just wanted to know, maybe you could introduce yourself. I'm Dr. Vibe. Yes.
Me, I am the host of the award-winning Dr. Vibe show. I've done over 2,000 conversations, and last year was the 2018 Innovation Award winner by the Canadian Ethnic Media Association. I'm a featured broadcaster on this platform, Get Vocal. I'm a featured contributor on a website called the Good Men Project, which have been there for 6 years, and I've done over 300 conversations on their platform, and I consider myself a connector, and I do this. I do at least 3 or 4 conversations.
Oh wow!
And I'm based
Toronto.
in Toronto.
I've only been there once.
Right, but interesting enough, at least 60% of my audience is in your country. So it's a truly international conversation. I hope that filled in a little bit about myself.
Okay, so how did you meet Dr. Francies?
To you.
Through Lawrence.
Oh, Lawrence.
Dr. Francis was introduced by the gentleman who has.
Okay.
Yes.
Lawrence,
the
is Lawrence
question
on the line?
Man.
Yeah. Oh, he's listening. Hi, Lawrence.
He's listening to the conversation. And there you go. So Lawrence, Dr. Rashid has a fan club, even though he's stuck in Oregon. All right, that's okay. So what I'm going to do then is I'm going to add. Well, I ain't going to go any further with that. I'm gonna start asking some questions that Dr. Rashid has. The first one is also what is not taken into consideration is RAD, reactive attachment disorder, especially for Black males. Often these young men have abandonment issues with Black males. No one understands this dynamic. It's also difficult for the Black male educator to make inroads with Black male students because these Black males often view other Black males, even educators, pathologically. How does Dr. Francis feel
I think
about that?
Dr. Rashid hit the nail on the head. There is a level of sometimes disdain that we receive from even African-American students. if we know that in our community, 66% of the homes are headed by women, okay, and the father was taken out of the home, strategically taken out of the home through mass incarceration, through unemployment, okay, through a number of government programs, strategically taken out of the home. And we have now encountered a generation of Black men without fathers in their homes. When we have that interaction with them in the schools, sometimes we get pushback because they're used to being raised by their mothers. And by the time we receive them in a secondary classroom, in the middle or the junior high, the minute we try to discipline them, we're used to getting this "you're not my father" pushback. And I did the same thing too. A Black male tried to discipline me, and the first thing I would say is, "You're not my father." But what I really meant to say is, "Where is my father?" Right? And because that Black man is missing, okay, we lashed out at anybody who tried to become that figure. So we understand as Black male educators that rules without relationship equal rebellion. I'm gonna say it again. Rules without relationship equal rebellion. So we have to establish the relationship first. The relationship has to come first. And when you're dealing with Black students, you have to set clear boundaries of who you are. Okay, I'm not your mama's boyfriend. I'm not your homie. I'm not your bruh. I'm not any of these things. I'm a grown man and I give you respect. So I expect you to give me the same thing. And a lot of times we have those clashes and we have to get them to trust us because they have been so disenfranchised by the institution of education all their lives that they don't trust educators and they think we're the black face of the white agenda. So they think, why should you care about me? And so we have to do a lot of behind the scenes work and repairing the damage done by the educational system to our boys to get our boys to even trust us. But once they trust us, we become like members of the family and that they know there's nothing we won't do for them. And then we can start to educate them. But with Black students, you have to earn the right to educate them. Even Black students, just because I'm a 6'3" Black male doesn't mean that they're going to, necessarily just respect me because of who I am.
They
test you. Oh yeah, they have to test you first. Mm-hmm. They definitely test you. So Dr. Rashid is absolutely right. He's absolutely right.
And absolutely right. And I believe that, is that echo here? Oh, sorry. That the Black males are stigmatized, automatically placed into special education. I've been teaching since 2009 as a substitute. Mm-hmm. Then I became a parent education teacher. I didn't think there was a need for parent education to be taught. I just thought, wow, where did that come from? And we have the millennials, they're just off the hook. They don't even know how to go grocery shopping. I was a parent mm-hmm. advocate in home visits. And then I said, wow, I think there's a need for me to take a little further. Maybe I should start volunteering in the classroom. My son's 12 now. And then I joined the school site. Well, I ran for the school site council. And you don't have to run. They just needed a Black parent to be part of the school site council. Then mm-hmm. I was appointed to PBIS. So that's the behavioral intervention where they track the actual behavior from 9 to 3:30, for example. And majority of the African-American males are ADHD. They're already diagnosed, autism. And the staff here or the professional development is not even addressed at the district level. So we have like 90% of the staff, faculty, they're white. And so like Dr. Francies conveyed earlier, I believe that that we lack professional development in regards to inclusion. So and it's just startling to me that they don't know how to react of a behavior issue. I'll give you an example. I work for middle school about 40 miles from here, and very diverse student body. I was asked to be the co-teacher. They just kind of could you help us out? And mm-hmm. I had to teach earth science. I had to take notes. algebra, special education, language arts, and I had a list of all the Black kids primarily who were diagnosed with ADHD. Actually had part of their IEP was to run up and down the stairs. Just get them out. Just get them out. Get them out. They say, excuse me, Miss White, could you monitor that? I'm like, what is there to monitor? But I didn't say that. So I was like, that's part of their IEP. They think we're antsy, we're unruly. We're just not, we have behavioral issues. They don't know what to do with us.
That's right. That's right. So.
Okay, I've got.
I want to just echo what Crystal was saying in terms of our roles as Black teachers. And a lot of times we're only seen in one light. So we have to overcome stereotypes. So recruitment overall, and I know time is running out. Recruitment is one thing, retention is another, right? Mm-hmm. And this is why in the school district that I'm employed in, we started a Black Educators Association, which had been dormant for probably some 18 years, right? So that Black teachers had a place to go and we could sit here and talk about these issues, okay? Black male teachers are more likely to stay at a school that has at least 2 other Black male teachers, so they can socialize, they can form some kind of community, right? But oftentimes when Black male educators get together and we begin to socialize, right, it sometimes is viewed down upon, right? Because it looks like we're in a barbershop, right? When we're just trying to culturally express ourselves, right? But we need to be able to debrief, and we need to have the meeting after the meeting. We need that cultural solidarity. We need that, and it enables us to go out into with our white colleagues and code switch, because Blacks in education has historically had to have dual identities. We have to have an identity in our community and identity on the job. And so we have to learn how to code switch. Finally, I want to say this, that with Black males in education, a lot of it has to do, so we talked about the stress level, we talked about the economics, but we hadn't really talked about the racial wealth gap that, Blacks in this country have less than 2% of America's wealth, right? So there's a huge disparities in terms of the racial wealth gap. Because education is not a high teaching profession, a lot of Blacks are not running to get into it. And again, especially if they have to be the provider and the protector in the household. So it's difficult for Black men to really get in the profession, because there are so many expectations for us in this profession that it can be daunting, and quite frankly, it can be scary.
Okay, Dr. Francis, can you stay for a few quick more minutes? Okay, because your Mr. Rashid has questions that he wants answered. I don't want to turn.
No problem.
So I'm just going to, before I do that, I just want to welcome on the Get Vocal platform, Joseph Burke. Hello, gentlemen. Vanel, thank you so much for stopping by. Again, if anyone wants to join in the room on the Get Vocal platform, there is a space open. Also, we have more comments coming on YouTube, but I'm going to get to Dr. Rashid because he's been so patient to have these questions answered. His first question, the next question he has is, how do you feel about the interview process for Black males who want to become educators? Especially ones, and especially Black males with advanced degrees and experience. Do you feel that Black males often have to dumb down their
He's absolutely right. Dr. Rashid is right. And Dr. Rashid knows this. Both of us have received advice from older Black male educators when we wanted to get positions in higher education or K through 12 to take our doctorate degrees off our resumes. And we're thinking to ourselves, we spend the last 6 to 7 years. Yes, to take the doctorate
to
degree.
take your doctorate degrees off your
Yes,
resume.
absolutely.
Yes.
Because what the older gentleman, and he wasn't lying, he said they are intimidated. They are intimidated by that degree. Okay. And so we understood that we had to be better than our white counterparts. So what we did is we go back to school. We accumulate 6 or 7 more years of college debt. No, now already knowing that we're behind in the racial wealth gap. So we accumulate more debt, still get passed up for promotion, have to take our advanced degrees a lot of times off our resume so that we don't seem like a threat to the white power structure that is there, right? Because again, the hiring process is not based on our ability to educate, but it's based on our ability to assimilate, to make our white colleagues feel comfortable and so that they know that we are team players and we can be as radical as they allow us to be, okay? And so I've been in plenty of interviews where I've never done, and I think it's a reason why I didn't, get a few jobs. I've been passed over for jobs. I've been told on the second and third interview, you're qualified, you're overqualified. Why do you want to work here? And not, and I would say maybe because of location or, I'm really interested in this job. And what would happen is I would get the call the next day. We decide to go with someone else, and then you will see later who they hired. And it's some, perhaps a white lady that, is 2 years of experience fresh out of college. So yes, it has happened too many times. I can tell you that too many times. And oftentimes when he talks about the interview process, and Crystal knows about this, they would often sometimes put a Black person in the interview process, and as a token, right? And that person is there to make them look like they're not biased, right? And so that person is there, and sometimes that person can culturally detect what's really going on and say, we really need this individual, but they're outvoted, and sometimes they're just, hate to use the word, but handkerchief hands, right? To go along, to get along. They're tokens. And so they can sense you being real about and passionate, and they're thinking to themselves, either I want to be the only Negro here, and I don't want somebody that looks like him or her, because when they come in, then I don't seem as Black and I'm not as special. That's one reason. And the other reason is just to simply be that pawn for the white power structure to say that they look diverse. So, it happens too often. It continues to happen, but it's something that I don't believe any sociologist has really studied and done an in-depth study on that. Because I believe once we see that, you'll see that the stories are staggering, and there's so many stories that can be interwoven in this fabric. You can tell a wonderful story of how Blacks have overcome despite the obstacles, but tell also an ugly story of hidden discrimination. And then often you will hear employers say, well, we want more Black male teachers, they just don't apply. They're just not out there. And then you will run and find out from your friends that, a number of Blacks have interviewed for the position, in the classroom or in administration, but they didn't even get an interview, right? Or somehow their application got lost. And so the weeding process of who they even interview, a lot of times is not clear. And the public would love to have certain educators that live in the community, that are dedicated to the people. But a lot of times these candidates don't get interviews, right? Or they'll hire a Black person who doesn't live in the community, who doesn't have the same interest level in the community, right? So the Blacks that get hired are usually have to go through a Eurocentric lens, and they have to pass certain tests. If that makes sense. I know.
Okay, good stuff. It does make sense. No, it did. And Lots of people are jumping on the Get Vocal platform, so I just want to shout them out. Greetings to Big Bad Brad. Greetings to So Steph. Greetings to Bobby. Greetings to Kinte. Thank you so much. And I'm glad we went on a little bit longer than we're supposed to because people are jumping in now. So I have a question for Crystal and Doctor. And I'm going to ask Crystal first. And this comes from the YouTube platform from P.S. Perel saying, what can parents do to help Black male educators get positions in the public school system? So Crystal, what about you first?
Question. Be more involved, attend the board meetings. Please come to the board meetings. And right now, currently, we're trying to organize a parent advisory committee. Be part of that committee. You have a voice. Come to the meetings and attend or join the PTA, the PTO now they call it. And also, yes?
Oh, so Crystal, let me interrupt. Can you lower your camera a bit because people are saying they can only see your eyes?
There it is.
All right. Better. I don't have, okay. All right. Yes.
There
so, yes, be actively involved, and you're involved with your school board trustees. Look and see who represents your. Now we're redistricting in our community, so that's happening all across California, and also go and attend the parent-teacher conferences, but volunteer in the classroom, and see who are they hiring. I always check the website. I have a second child now, and look up the teacher's credentials. Pass the word. Like white Americans, they network for jobs. So African Americans, we need to network and not, and work together as a team and become a community.
That's right. Real quickly, I don't know if the parent is white or Black, but I just want to echo Crystal. So what can a parent do to make sure that there are more Black men in the classroom? They have to advocate, have to go down to the board meeting, okay? Write articles for the local papers in the opinion section, okay? Given numbers and data. They can do that. And then serving on some of those committees that Crystal just talked about, Student Site Council, the PTO, okay? Black Parent Advisory Councils, if your district has one. And then signing petitions and saying, hey, we need a seat at the table when you are hiring teachers that are going to be teaching and educating our students, okay? So that we need a representative from the table. So one of the things that we want to try to do with the Black Teachers Association in the district that I'm in and where I'm the president of is make sure that we have someone from the community and a Black teacher from our association represented at the table when you interview a Black candidate, okay? And so we want to make sure that, and then eventually we want to get to where all candidates that we have a seat at the table, so that we know, because Black parents can tell in the first minute whether you're gonna survive in the classroom with their kids. They can tell, and if you don't have it, and if you don't have that factor, they're gonna say that those kids are gonna eat them alive. They're not going to work. But usually they go through a Eurocentric lens. And again, they're hired based on their ability to get along with the staff there. And even in schools that are predominantly Black, the teaching staff, tends to be predominantly white. Okay. And so again, they're hiring their friends. And so what we need to be able to do, parents have to go ahead and take back control of the public schools. Okay, and say we need a seat at the table when you are hiring, and then the other thing is we have to encourage more of our Black boys to get into the field of education. I always say the next crop of strong Black teachers are right there in the classroom. We just haven't recognized it yet, but they're right there in the classroom, and we have to, if we are intentional, we have to do strategic hiring, and we have to give incentives, right, to get somebody to come to California, right. And to pay these high rents and all that, we need districts that will give incentives and housing vouchers to these young Black male teachers. If we know HBCUs produce 40% of America's teachers, we have to create a pipeline, and we have to be able to pay back some student loans, and we have to give housing incentives and monetary incentives for those Black teachers, Black male teachers that are willing to come to predominantly Black schools and be unapologetic and change the narrative. Now, if we are serious about equity, okay, if we are serious about closing the achievement gap, then that's what we would do. It doesn't take rocket science, but a lot of times we do a lot of talking with more symbolism over substance.
Okay, I want to, and we're going to go for a little bit longer, Doctor, unless you have to go, because this is getting even, we're taking it to another level here. And Crystal, thank you for hanging on and keeping on with us. I want both of you to respond to me on this. Do you hear parents expressing their concern? Do you hear Black parents expressing their concern about the lack of Black male teachers in the public school system in
You want to answer that first, Kristen?
Oh, okay. I haven't heard or spoken to many parents in regards to just African American teachers they're concerned about, not particularly male African American males, but I did see recently on the news, I think it might have been CNN or 60 Minutes, that yes, that they're just not hiring African American males purposely because of the intimidation. This is what I'm experiencing in Antioch Unified School District. So I think another suggestion is, well, you could be a part of the parent advisory committee as a hiring process, a part of that panel. They have parents part of the panel and track the applications. If you ask your friend to go apply, there's an African American male, track the hiring process, because it seems like there's so many hoops to, so to speak, to go through. I have to answer questions before I get a phone interview.
Yeah.
I had like 3 interviews in the last week, and then they have a phone interview, and then they'll Skype or Google Hangout. I can't even get into the door, and I'm an African American female. So yes, I would suggest that yes, please be involved in the community, and that's about all I've heard from other parents. Dr. Francis?
So, what was the question again, Dr. Vibe?
It's just that this conversation that we're having tonight about the lack of Black male teachers in the K-12 public school system in America, do you hear Black parents talking about this and any concern about this?
So I've had several Black parent groups over the years, and I hear that concern a lot. You know, they would often go to the Black educators on campus and say, "How come you can't be the principal? We need somebody like you that represents us," right? So you hear it a lot. I know in the circles I'm in, you know, the frustration, and they're wondering why there are not more African American teachers in the classroom. And so a lot of times it's because our parents simply don't know how the institution of education is run and how it operates, and how discrimination can happen under the guise of equity and equality for all students. They don't understand how school boards work, right, Crystal? They don't understand sometimes how laws are made and how, you know, school site councils work and stuff, and policies are passed, right? So Dr. Carol Anderson wrote a book called White Rage, and she talked about how white rage a lot of times is silent, and it operates in courtrooms and school board rooms, and it's not loud, but it operates, and it's real, okay? And so there's sometimes a pushback, you know, when progress is happening. So Black parents, yes, to answer the question, they have been concerned. A lot of times they just don't know how to advocate for their students. And that's why I believe it's very important to be a part of a Black parent group. If they don't have one at your school, start one. Go to the site plan. Look at, if it's a Title I school, look at if they're receiving LCAP funds. Look at the LCFF plan. Look at their site plans and see what are they doing to remediate the disparities, the racial disparities at the school. And if they don't have one, Black parents, start one. And I'm serious, start one. Most schools in California have a significant Hispanic population, and they have an ELAC, which is doing phenomenal things for the Hispanic population. but Black parents don't tend to come out to those, right? For obvious cultural and language barriers. So Black schools need a BLAC. We need a BLAC. You know, we need something for us. We need something specifically for us. And so again, we need to ask why. And when you go, don't ask why aren't there more men of color? Don't say it. Be specific. Say Black men. Don't fall under the multicultural umbrella, which has been used as an agenda to silence the Black agenda or throw the Black agenda to the back. Say, why aren't there more Black men? And be specific and be unapologetically Black.
And if I could interject, we have an education chair, Mr. Willie Mims, who's been very supportive of attending my board meetings. I don't think a lot of parents are aware that there is an education chair for every NAACP branch that can represent you as a parent to attend those board meetings. So NAACP should be aware of these applications that are being denied, rejected. I mean, they have your back, NAACP. That's right. And Urban League.
That's right. Yeah.
Okay. I've got another question from P.S. Perel. No, P.S. Purell. Yeah, that's correct. And more people are coming on. So as we go longer, we go stronger. And Lawrence Rashid is on Dr. Rashid is on YouTube, and he's saying, y'all looking good. So that's from him. And
good day, brother.
He is saying, P.S. Perel says, are there any meetings or avenues to bring parents together on these issues? I'm a parent in the Antioch school system and did not really know that this was an issue. Oh, her name is Patricia Spurrell. So thank you, Patricia, for sharing your name. But she's wanting to know if there are any meetings or avenues to bring parents together on these issues in Antioch. So I think you just gave
yes, you can contact the NAACP here, and it's the Pittsburgh branch. And she can reach out to me, Board Trustee Crystal Sawyer White. I'm on the board Antioch Unified School District website. I'll be happy to reach out to you and attend one of our meetings. We have one coming up in August.
Wonderful. So Steph is saying on the Get Vocal platform, the semi-affluent Black folk have moved to the suburbs to escape the quote inner city unquote, and are now complaining about the lack of Black teachers.
That is deep. So let me. I don't know who made the comment, but there's some.
Steph.
There's a lot of truth in that. But let me address that because I want to look at the bigger picture. Yes, I believe throughout the 80s and 90s there was the flight of the Black middle class, right, from urban communities, and as a result, in terms of moving to the suburbs, they left a lot of our brothers and sisters in the inner cities without the role models. So you had a working Black middle class that kids could look up to in my parents' days in the inner cities. And with that void being there, the drug dealers and a lot of people that involved in a lot of criminal activity became the role models of the kids. But I think it's more complicated than, because I agree that certain Blacks did move out to the suburbs to receive some of the benefits of white society, right? For their students to go to a more diverse school. But I think it's bigger than that. I think African Americans who became a part of this, I'll use quotations, the Black middle class, even though I don't think that really exists. But this Black middle class really was looking at trying to get better opportunities for their students. They're looking at better opportunities, right? They looked at the schools in the inner city and saw that they were struggling. And so they decided to move out to the suburbs. And I met a lot of Blacks who moved out, who made the decision to move out to the suburbs. And they said, what we miss is the Black community coming together in the inner city. We miss having a solid community. We miss having teachers that look like us, pastors that look like us, policemen that look like us. We miss that in the inner city. And then we came to the suburbs to get a better life. And yes, we have lower crime rates, but now our kids go to schools that are predominantly white, yet and still they're suffering because these teachers don't know how to educate our students. And my son is still being discriminated against. Now, because of gentrification that has happened all over the country, in Black urban cities all over the country, whether it be Philadelphia, whether it be DC, Los Angeles, my hometown of San Francisco, Oakland, whites are moving back to the inner cities, okay? And Blacks now the poor Blacks are being forced to move out, okay, to these communities. And they're moved out to the suburbs. They come out to the suburbs and they are forced to go to these schools that have now all of a sudden become failing schools because of white flight. Okay, so now they attend suburban ghetto schools. So on the outside, it looks like Antioch. It's a wonderful city. It is, and it's in a lot of ways it's a very beautiful city and stuff like that. But they're suffering from a lot of the urban issues without having the urban resources. And the school districts, a lot of times in these suburban areas, have been slow to change, right? So you get a Ferguson, which is a suburb of St. Louis, right? So you have a town that's predominantly Black, but then you have a teaching force and a police force that is still predominantly white, and then you get this clash, boom, right? Because the social service institutions don't reflect the people that actually live in the city. And that's what you see in a lot of these suburban areas that have this huge influx of minorities, and especially African-American people. And you see this clash happening in the public schools. So yes, a lot of Blacks did move out for something better. And then, because of gentrification, lower socioeconomic Blacks were forced to move out, and now they attend the same. In other words, the Huxtables moved out by choice, and then later the hood was forced to move out. And so now the Blacks, hood and Huxtables, are now in these suburban schools, and then whites have moved to other communities, or they've gone back to the inner cities. So it's complicated. I wouldn't place blame on anyone, because we do not have control of Blacks. I'm talking about Black people, of the institution of education as a whole. We don't have control over it, right? So the real solution, if you really want a solution, I don't know who the lady who made the comment, the real solution is to start your own educational institutions. You have to start your own educational institutions, because one of the latent effects of Brown versus Board of Education, okay, was that we lost a lot of quality Black educators, and we've never been able to get those educators back, because they could teach our kids, but we could not teach theirs. And as a result, a lot of Black educators lost their jobs, okay? So we bust our kids to white educators thinking that they were gonna get a better education. And the schools were, they were integrated but never desegregated, if that makes sense.
And if I interject on that the San Francisco Unified School District is working with Boys and Girls Club and also other, the community centers. They're working, we need to work with our mayors. Our mayors need to be intricately involved with the school district. Our superintendent's refusing to meet with the mayor. I've been on the board for almost 3 years, and I was raised in Detroit, Michigan. I knew my principal down the street. I knew the doctor down the street, or the blue collar. We knew someone that worked in appliance. We took care of everybody in our neighborhood. It was predominantly African American, but I had the YMCA down the street. We don't have a YMCA here. We don't have a Boys and Girls Club of America here. The kids don't have much to do here. And so that what they're doing in San Francisco Unified, they're working together as a beacon to work with this, the community centers and the actual school site So the Boys and Girls Club is on the actual school site for the after school programs, which they can have chess, they can have robotics, STEM, and STEAM.
Right.
And that's not happening here. I'm just totally, it's combative debacle at the board meetings. I need parent support tremendously.
That's right.
Well, it's interesting you mentioned that, because another thing, and we have it, this situation also exists in Toronto, so it's not an American thing. It's a Canada thing too, in Toronto. But what has happened here is a number of African Canadians have moved from the city to the suburbs. But the difficulty is they're not the same sort of environments and supports in the suburbs as there was in the city. And so I think I'm echoing what both of you are saying, that yes, social stuff, you're right. They've moved out and now they realize, we don't got this anymore. We don't got that anymore. And you basically start from ground zero. And one of the biggest challenges with a lot of Black environments is getting space.
Right, like in Detroit, we had the city jobs. When I was at 17 or 18, I worked for the unemployment department. But really, it really enlightened me. I actually passed out government cheese. I saw people on food stamps. It was awakening, a rude awakening to see that the people actually didn't have the actual means to get by. And so, but I had a job. I had a job with the city of Detroit, every summer. And I've been advocating for that. We don't have, only thing we have is the community pool across the street from my house. And majority of the swim instructors are not African American.
Yeah. Let me just say this, that when you talk about specifically Antioch, California, there's a misnomer that in Antioch, the majority of the Black people live here, ghetto and are unruly, which is totally not the case. Okay, the majority of Blacks that live in Antioch are homeowners, and they are hard-working, very intelligent, very smart people, and they deserve great public schools. We pay their salaries. These are public institutions and they belong to the people. But we need more than token positions. We need to make sure that our Black educators are accountable to the community. They have to be accountable to the community. They have to speak up for the community. Okay, so if we hire you, there is an incentive in there for our students. I would sometimes ask my colleagues, and we'll get back to the question. I'll ask a lot of my colleagues in education, as Black male administrators or teachers, when a Black student walks into the classroom, what advantage do they have? Do they have any advantage? Or are you just like the rest? Are you colorblind like the rest? What if for years not having a Black educator in the classroom that looks like them was a disadvantage? How are they advantaged now that you are now in this position? Or are you an educational albino and you have no color and you treat them just like, or sometimes even worse than the white educators? Because a lot of the damage that have been done to our kids, unfortunately, have been done by Black educators, people that look like them, who have done sometimes more damage than their white counterparts, right? So we have a responsibility to our people. We are educators for liberation. We believe in education for liberation, social justice. Our kids should have an advantage. I don't believe in Black superiority, but I do believe in Black exceptionality. I believe there is no group of people in this world like Black people, okay? And I believe that we are distinct. And I don't believe that we're any better than anybody, but I do believe that we are exceptional people. And so I believe with that has to come certain rights and privileges, especially being a Black person in the United States. It comes with certain rights and privileges that I believe that we are entitled to in this country, and specifically in the field of education. When a Black student walks in, they're entitled to certain things. And I don't want to get into something else, but I believe that our students deserve much better, especially from Black educators.
We're gonna hold it at that. There's still more stuff coming, folks. So we ain't leaving yet. Just some more stuff coming on. Just catching up with with some comments here. Bobby's saying low income housing is the key. He also says rehabilitation of the homeless is important. He also says pack the chamber council meeting and change the differences in your community. Steph saying, I don't believe in educating Black children predominantly in white spaces, especially before the age of 10 and 11. I'm going to flip over.
No. Let me say this about
I got some serious people here.
Steph, that sister, when you look at elementary schools, over 90% of those teachers, elementary schools, are white middle class female. And so they're being socialized at a certain age to love or value Eurocentric things, right? They don't see themselves in the curriculum. And this is why by the time, you see them in kindergarten, our kids are excited, especially our boys. They're very excited. By the time they get to the 4th grade, they are disinterested in schools. They're being socialized. And that's why we started off this conversation. The chief objective of schools is socialization. They're being socialized to not like school or not to see themselves in the curriculum, right? They're being controlled through testocracy. And as a result, the system is playing itself out, and our kids don't value, they can't see themselves doing anything in this field or anything beyond being an athlete or entertainer because of what's going on in these elementary schools. They're getting behind on their reading scores early because there's a cultural clash that no one is talking about in elementary school. So I believe that Black educators, and I agree with Steph, that we should educate Black students in Black spaces. I always say this to my white colleagues: if you have Black boys finishing at the bottom of every academic category for the last 50 years in public schools, and then you looked at the teaching core, and it was 83% Black, you wouldn't take your kid out to school, or would you just give us one more year and one more chance and hope that the system would just change in and of itself, right? And so, no, they would take their students, and I wouldn't blame them. Take your son out, and they would educate their students from home. Now, if a lot of our parents could afford that, they would do it, right? We as African Americans, I say this, we are the richest people of African descent on the face of the planet, okay? We have spending power. We demonstrated our spending power with Black Panther. We demonstrated our spending power when it comes to the clothing industry. Once we get the right values and we refocus our values on education, okay, over buying Michael Jordan tennis shoes, okay, over buying Mercedes-Benz or buying alcohol, all these other things, buying cars, all these things that depreciate in value. Once we go ahead and refocus our values back on education, we can start our own schools and we can educate our own. This is one of the things that we lost from Brown versus Board. Again, they integrated the schools and never truly desegregated it. So the new face of segregation has become special education. They have segregated our kids, and our kids are now more segregated than ever. Why is that? Our communities are segregated. So our schools are a microcosm of the community around them. And so we have to go ahead and say, hey, look, let's do something different. Now, before we open up our schools, I remember going to school in the 1980s, and I had Chinese friends who would go to Saturday schools. They would supplement their education. They believed in education. We can do Saturday schools for African-American students, okay, until we have our own institutions by which we can select our own teachers, and we can go ahead and create our own standards, and we can go ahead and educate our kids the best way we know how. This is what we had before schools were, quote unquote, desegregated, okay? This is what we had. Our kids were taught by the good shepherd and not the hired hand. They were taught by teachers who went to church in their community, who shopped in their supermarkets, okay? Who their parents knew. There were community connections and cultural connections that before integration, before Brown versus Board, teachers had with their students. And we don't have that, okay? What we wanted as Black people, we wanted a redistribution of resources. They gave us integration, and it we haven't been able to bounce back since.
And I think also to take it to the media. I mean, this has been decades and decades that I hate to say it, white people have dominated the public school sector. They're the superintendent. They're the principals. They're you know, we enroll our students in these schools, and we don't realize who is in charge, who's empowering these superintendents to think that they could hire whoever they like, and whoever they want to fire. There's a lot of nepotism. So they have the uncles, the cousins, the aunties, all hiring generation after generation. We could go back to almost the 1950s. The same people, the same families. I'm seeing the same last names on the classified personnel list, on the certificate personnel list. And the special education, in regards to what Dr. Francies said, major lawsuits. Most of the lawsuits are African-American mothers suing because their kids have been jumped on and on the playground. And these class monitors or security guards are white, and they just stand there. I read documents after documents of lawsuits, and they just settle out of court. And so one particular woman, for example, she actually commutes from Sacramento Unified School District, and she lives in Antioch because she was fed up that her son was on 5 different medications for ADHD. He's suffering from post-traumatic stress, which is a whole different ball game. It's not anything to do with the war. It's not anything to do with drive-bys. It's the situation where they're traumatized because they have, the teachers don't have their back. Just don't have their back. They're jumped. So my son is not, which I don't know how many people are listening, is not in the.
All right. Well, we're going to close it down eventually here, but there's a few more comments that need to be made. Dr. Rashid is saying on the YouTube platform, white flight or black middle class moving out of the out or the proliferation of underprivileged Black students is not an excuse to undereducate our babies. He also says de facto segregation is not an excuse to undereducate our babies. So I think before we close out, I think the only good way to close out is another question from So Steph. So actually, well, she's got a few more. Like I was going to ask one. She's got a few more coming. So next up.
I'm sorry,
Steph,
I can't
we should
see
call this
you,
a Social
Dr.
Steph
Vibe
show. Say,
okay. Oh, okay.
We can see you.
All right.
Well, we can see you. All right. Social Steph's first question: what can be done about the inequities regarding the funding of schools based on property taxes?
Good question. Again, this is a part of our board meetings. You can question that when you attend the board meetings. The superintendent, I would email the superintendent. Our California, the next level would be the California Department of Education. Our new superintendent, I would talk to him directly, or again to any of the board trustees. We're responsible where the money is allocated in regards for your taxes to employ our district. Dr. Francis?
No, I'll just to piggyback on you. I believe you got to go to the board to deal with that. Again, I think it goes back to the whole conversation we had about the racial wealth disparity. Okay, how the average Black family in this country is probably worth less than $15,000, and the average white family worth over $100,000, right? In terms of having generational wealth. Being able to decide and choose to move where you want to move to and have the resources at the school. But let me just say this. Money has been tossed to inner city schools for years, and they have not been able to close the achievement gap, right? And so a lot of times people think what equity is placing a bunch of laptops among Black children and say, there you go, now you have what the white students have, right? It's bigger than throwing money at the situation, right? You need the right programs, but you need the right personnel. You need Blacks in influential positions that we choose, okay? Not that are chosen by the establishment, but that the community chooses, that has a track record of being unapologetic to that particular community and delivering for that community and not selling the community out. You need individuals like that. They say one of the easiest ways to stop a Black revolutionary is to put them on payroll. Because once you put them on payroll, guess what? They're no longer the same. So you need individuals like that are committed to the community, that can come in and allocate the money to where it needs to go. So if you have a Black student that's attending a Title I school and they're receiving LCAP funds, you have to look at that site plan. You have to go to those LCAP meetings and see from the district how that money is being allocated. And it has to specifically say this money is going for African American achievement under this state, initiative. It has to be specific, and we need to know who is being hired for these interventions. How have these interventions worked? Is this proven? Right? We need to know, because a lot of times in schools, we as Black parents, we go for symbolism over substance, and we fight the wrong battles. Right? So, for instance, she mentioned Antioch Unified School District, and I don't attack people. I try to attack problems. But in 2017, 2018, okay, there were 67 administrators in that district. Now, Antioch Unified is a school district that is minority. Whites are the minority. I want to say, well, I don't know the specific number right now, but I do know that they are overwhelmingly the minority in that district, but they represent the majority when it comes to, out of 67 administrators, 39 of them were white that year. And you had 17 of those administrators were African American. Okay, so 25% of all the administrators in Antioch Unified were African American. And I believe we represent about 23% of the school district. So you have a fair representation, but even among those hires, how much power do they have? Okay, how much did the community have a say in those hires? And then also among those hires, only, I believe, 7% of the total administrators in that district were African American men. Okay, so you still have a huge you have a huge disparity in the hiring of African American and the promotion of African American men. But again, if we don't look at the California Department of Education statistics, if we don't do our research, we don't know these things. We don't know. We just think teachers magically appear in the classroom and the administrators are magically appear in the classroom. And the people that are making life decisions about who is shaping your student, they're making decisions. Don't live in your community. Okay, don't have interactions with your community unless there's a level of interest convergence. They don't live among us. We don't know these things, and we can't hold these people accountable if we don't know these things. So we have to educate our community about this while we're in the public schools. And then we have to look, these are just Band-Aid answers, but then we have to also look at eventually starting schools for African American students. Okay, because not Frederick Douglass, but Marcus Garvey once said this line. He says, anything that's done for Black people has to be done by Black people. Okay, but the greatest weapon, he said, used against Black people is disorganization. So we have to get organized and start something so that we can employ our men. Okay, we can employ our women, and we can educate our own. And then we can finally start looking. Then we have to start looking at reparations, which is a totally different show. But we have to start looking at that so that, and I'm not talking about just getting a dollar amount. I'm talking about having access to oil wells and resources, not just money. We don't need that. We'll just spend it and give it right back to the white power structure. But we need to start looking at redistribution of resources, land. Okay, we need to start having things like that, so that we can start to have a true sense of equality in this country and start looking at our white counterparts on the same level. But I believe the reason why we will never get respected in the field of education is because we're not worth anything. If you look at Blacks, if we own less than 2% of the wealth, guess what? The reason why they shoot our boys down in the streets is because they're not worth anything. What are we going to do? All we're going to do is go to the same civil rights organizations and whine and complain, and we are more reactionary than proactive, right? We have to start looking how we're going to build Black businesses, how we're going to start building Black schools, and how we're going to recycle our dollars in our community so that we can really start talking about true equity in this country. Until then, we're fighting a system that is tough, and we have a lot of Band-Aid answers, but we have other things to do. Yes.
Yeah, those are other conversations. I want to stay focused on this here, sorry. But I know you are very, you're very passionate. I'm enjoying it 150%. I'm gonna see if we can. I'm gonna see if we can get 2 more things in before we close out. And Crystal is back, which is great. I'm just gonna say on the okay, we're going back to YouTube. Diana Renee says no Black teachers. That's the agenda. Also, I've got 2 questions left. First one will go to, the first one is So Steph again, asking what can be done about getting Black people to become diagnosticians, counselors, speech therapists.
That's a good question. And let me I'll quickly answer that. As a credential school counselor, there were not a lot of African Americans, obviously, in my master's program. And because of the story I mentioned earlier, a lot of Blacks don't feel like incentivized to get into that field. But I think now that we are realizing that we are victims of post-traumatic slave disorder, and more Blacks, especially in the Black church, are starting to now embrace mental health. You're starting to see more Blacks comfortable with getting therapists to deal with the racial trauma that they are going through. And so it starts now. It starts with the students that are in school, really educating them about racial trauma and what they can do to go back to their own community and assist. But a lot of times, again, because they know it's going to be tough going to predominantly white institutions to be educated, and being educated by someone who may not understand your racial background or your community, it's a deterrence. But if they can endure the program, or I would say if you can go to an HBCU, I think they do an excellent job in preparing our young Black men and women to get into the field of education, become counselors, psychologists, and therapists. Do that. And then come back to your community and help. But we have to start putting it out there right now. We have to start doing that. But school districts have to incentivize Black counselors, therapists to get into that field. Giving some kind of monetary incentives for those that are coming, especially making a difference in predominantly Black institutions.
Yes.
Okay. Well, Crystal is back.
Yes.
We can see all of her again, which is nice. One last question, and Dr. Rashid has put it out to the doctor, but I also want to put it out to Crystal. So Crystal first. Here's the question. What would be your educational dream team?
A multidisciplinary team. Very diverse. There would be a school psychologist. We're having difficulty hiring social workers. Supposedly they're not applying. To address Dr. Francis in regards to mental health, now they call it behavioral health. The issues that a lot of the students, for example, my last job was at Job Corps, and 80% of the students are dropped off on the island, Treasure Island, stay in dormitories. We have a wellness center on the premises, and they need some support systems. The parents do not communicate with them. They actually live there. So we actually need a school psychologist, disability coordinator. The teachers need to be actively involved in the curriculum, professional development, inclusion practices, and this working together as a multidisciplinary team.
All right. So I hope I got the question right. My educational dream team. I would have.
Yeah.
This is my dream team. Mary McLeod Bethune.
Oh, I see. Okay.
Joe Clark. Umar Johnson. Dr. Lawrence Rashid, Beverly Tatum, and then I'll be the sixth man coming off the bench. How about that?
Okay.
I just want to be in that number. I want to be. I want to be in that number. I would love to be in that number. So those would be the individuals that I would love, because they all these individuals believe. Also, probably Benjamin E. Mays. A lot of people, do your research. Google him. President of Morehouse College, mentor to Martin Luther King. The stuff that he was able to do is just phenomenal. And these individuals all have one thing in common. They believed in Black excellence. They believed in Black exceptionality. Okay. They believed in education for liberation. They were phenomenal educators. So definitely that would be my dream team, to go with individuals like that. I think they've done phenomenal things for Black people, and I stand on their shoulders today.
That is a great way to end off an epic conversation. I'd like to say
pleasure.
Thank you to Crystal for jumping in. Of course, Dr. Francies, thank you so much. Dr. Francies, if people want to get in touch with you, how can they do that?
Right now, how would they get in contact with me? Just go ahead and email me. I have my social media sites. I'm not on social media right now. I'm a pastor, and I got members on social media that they may post stuff that I don't think I want to see, because what I don't know, I don't know. Okay, but I do realize how important it is. So right now, you can email me at L as in Lamont Frank, FRAN, L Fran 512 at yahoo.com. Again, that is LFRAN 512 at yahoo.com. If you have any other questions, you can get in contact with me there. Also, I am the pastor of the Delta Bay Church of Christ. You can find out what we're doing and always get in contact with me. You can call the church phone number. Just log on www.deltabaycoc.org. Again, that's www.deltabaycoc.org if you want to know, if you want to be able to get in contact with me. I can talk about faith, religion, education, kind of a jack of all trades. So if you want to get in contact with me, you can do that as well. And no time is a good time, so any time is the right time. That's what I always say.
Right on. Well, before we leave, I want to thank everyone who took part of this epic conversation I'm going to start on Periscope at Walter Beasley, at JR Pazar, at Mert Bazan 16, Natalie Crew. Thank you, Natalie Crew, to share this conversation with your followers. Also, Herbie's Hancock. Hangout. I think about Herbie Hancock.
It's like, wow. Okay.
Duh, yes. Herbie Hancock. No. I wish it was him, but I'm speaking it. Herbie's Hangout on the Periscope end. Now on the YouTube end, had a number of people, of course, Dr. Lawrence Rashid.
So I want to give a shout out to Dr. Lawrence Rashid, my brother from another mother.
Hey.
He made it all possible. My brother, stay down in Oregon, my brother. We got you.
Yes.
We got you, man.
And if you want to hear Dr. C's opining, check out Do You Know What Time It Is? A live audio stream conversation this Sunday at 9 p.m. Eastern Time. He's a regular contributor. And Dr. Rashid's been on most of the last 5 years, almost every Sunday. So check it out. Also, L French on YouTube. Patricia Sparrell, who lives in Antioch. Thank you so much.
Yes,
for
thank
coming
you.
by. And then we've got
Patricia.
It was great. Luke, who shouts out, Luke, who's from Canada, Windsor, says that was good. Always intense on the Dr. Vibe show. Thank you. So good intense. There's also Bobby, of course. So Steph. What would this conversation also be without So Steph? Who else do we got on here? Kinte, thank you so much. Big Bad Brad, thank you so much. Joseph Burke, thank you. Mr. Wonderful, thank you. Lokesh from the Get Vocal team, thank you very much. So got a whole
Great.
myriad of people.
Yes.
I like to do this again.
And now,
yes,
we've got to get out of here quick. Well, I'm just going to say that on the 29th of this month at 9 p.m. Eastern Time, Dr. Francis is back. And we're going to invite some African male educators. So we're going to have a round table. We got to make this because, yes, hopefully, Dr. Rashid, I've got 2 minutes to finish this off. So going to do it right quick. As always, I like to say, live your life as a dream. If you can dream it, you can make it. Next up, sometimes you have to get smaller to get stronger. And then finally, block assumptions and then aim bigger, aim better, aim higher, aim wider. The next time I will be on the Get Local platform, I'll be hosting a cross-Canada conversation for Black Canadians Sunday afternoon at 2 p.m. to 3:30 p.m. We're going to talk about 2 conversation pieces. The first one is, who is your Black hero or heroine? And then we have a national election coming up in October, on October 21st of this year. And the title of the conversation will be, it may be summertime, but you got to think about the election.
All right.
So that is going to be the next conversation piece on Sunday at Get Vocal. God bless. Peace be well. Keep the faith. And as always, I say, walk good. Good night, everybody.